Time to get ticulate. Well, hopefully I'll be a little more articulate. But sheer heart attack next. Crown Jewels on PLD Projects. Crown Jewels. Welcome back to PLD Projects Crown Jewels. I am your host, PLD, and this is the podcast where I take you through a long journey through Queen catalog and the solo projects as well. We listen to every song, every version of every song, as we try to determine which is the crown jewel of each song, the best version that we can slide into our ultimate playlist. And through this journey, I'll go through, give you some history, some notes, and some quotes. We'll see if it fits into my top 10 Queen-related songs of all time. And I got to say, this week, folks, is a little easier than the last 2 weeks. We've had a couple of long episodes in a row, a couple of almost unmanageable 1 hour and a half on one song for We'll Rock You and We're the Champions. Sheer Heart Attack, a great song. Quite a few fewer versions, so it'll be much more manageable episode this week. This week's song, Sheer Heart Attack. And no, it is not, you're not mistaken. This is on the News of the World album, not the album Sheer Heart Attack. Although that is when it was written, or at least initially tried. Roger basically wrote the song, but it never was finished in time for the album called Sheer Heart Attack. So it got pushed back. Got pushed back a couple of albums, absolutely. But quite honestly, things always seem to work out how they should. And Sheer Heart Attack fits much better amongst the raw News of the World album than it did amongst, say, Night at the Opera, Day at the Races. In fact, this is at the height of the punk movement, the punk era. Queen was recording this album side by side with the Sex Pistols. Famous story about Sid Vicious coming into the Queen recording session and Freddie Mercury having to kick him out physically. That's another story you should listen to Freddie tell it on many documentaries. A fun piece of lore. But this is very much a punk song. I'm not going to lie. Roger writing a punk song well before the punk movement. It fits in very well with the time. But all right, let's get through the little quick dirty of it. We do have, let's see, about 10 versions to listen to. No, it's still more than some of the songs we have, although many of them are live. We have, and I'll list them now, the album version, obviously. We have the Queen Rocks video version, a compilation, original rough mix, which is a demo, a Wessex reel-to-reel version, which is a reel-to-reel, kind of like another demo, basically, different kind of mix. And then we have, let's see, live in Houston, 1977. The Live Killers version, live in Hammersmith 1979, live in Paris 1979, Queen Rock Montreal from Montreal 1981, and On Fire at the Bowl, live from Milton Keynes in 1982. All right, let's get to it. How we do it is, if you look in the show notes, I have a link to a Google Sheet, which will have links to all the YouTube versions of all the different versions that have YouTube links for them. When we get to that part of the podcast, you're going to pause this podcast, click on those links, listen to the version we're going to talk about, come back and we'll talk about it. Now, if you don't want to listen to them, that's fine. I'll still talk about them. You can still learn about it. Hell, maybe at the end, you'll listen to everything I say. Maybe that'll choose. Maybe you only want to listen to the Crown Jewel version at the end. Either way, it's up to you. I don't care. You do what you want to do. I only provide it. You listen how you want to listen. You engage how you want to engage. But they're there for you if you want. All right, let's get to it then. Sheer Heart Attack. Let's see the notes and quotes. Written by Roger Taylor, as I mentioned before. It features Freddie on lead and backing vocals, Brian May on guitars, and then Roger on lead and backing vocals, drums, rhythm guitar, and bass guitar. That's right, that's it. This is a John Deaconless tune, at least for the album version. On stage, John plays the bass. But in the album recording, basically, this is almost a Roger demo. Brian added some additional guitars, and Freddie plays lead vocals. But of course, not all lead vocals. As I said, Roger does some lead vocals as well. It kind of becomes a little bit of a duet at times, but we'll get into that, especially when we get to some of the quotes I have. All right, before we get into the listening portion of the podcast, I do have a bunch of quotes that I found interesting when it comes to this song. Let's get through a few of those. Brian May from Circus Magazine, 1978. It sounds like a punk or new wave song, but it was written at the time as the Sheer Heart Attack LP. Roger played it to us then, but it wasn't quite finished, and he didn't have time to complete it before we started recording. That was 3 years ago, and now almost all these records you hear are like that period. Freddie actually talked to Circus as well in 1978, says, John keeps a very close eyes on our business affairs. He knows everything that's going on and shouldn't be going on. If God forsakes us now, the rest of the group won't do anything unless John says it's all right. Roger is very important to us in a different way. He's always been an out and out rock and roll fan with no time to stop and think about music, and that's very good for us. Instinct. He's also the one who's most aware of facets of music, and that's essential in the band. If you listen to Sheer Heart Attack on the new album, you'll see what we mean. It sounds like punk or a new wave song, but it was written at the time of Sheer Heart Attack LP. He played it to us then, but it wasn't quite finished, and he didn't have time to complete it before we started recording. Now, Brian, on his 2003 website, as we get a little bit further, it's interesting to hear different quotes the further we get away from the actual album. Brian said Roger had done a demo, and our usual practice was to use the demos as a bed for the final track. Roger had sung it all, but the decision was made to get Freddie to do the job for the record. Roger was keen that Freddie sing it pretty much like the demo to retain the kind of punk atmosphere. Freddie didn't find it that easy since it wasn't his natural style, but it's Freddie you hear doing the voices double tracked. However, Roger's voice is in there in odd lines, joining in on the hey, 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 and ticulate. And the choruses are, I think, all of us, but with Roger up front. The demo version is dominating. In fact, it sounds to me like all Roger in the chorus in the mix now that I listen to it. So it's a nice little melange you have there. Of course, it was a tour de force for Freddie live. It brought out his destructive side. I also enjoyed it live. Nice to go flat out and uncompromisingly heavy at the end of the show. Strangely enough, it was Roger who would win when someone suggested Sheer Heart Attack as an extra encore. It was totally draining for him to keep up that pattern, especially when we got into it and got more and more extended in our enthusiasm. Taylor Hawkins from The Foo cites Sheer Heart Attack as one of his favorite tracks, and even he recognizes the physical commitment it takes. Again, there's mentions of Taylor Hawkins and the Foo Fighters, good friends to the band. I love that camaraderie that they have. Roger talked to Goldmine in 2015, saying Sheer Heart Attack is really all about attitude. It was tapping very much into the punk ethos. It's a thrash. It's about the sheer frustration of being inarticulate and not being able to express your rage, I guess. It was meant to be about a teenager. I'd written some of the songs a few years earlier during the period we were working on the Sheer Heart Attack album, but we hadn't recorded it properly. So I think I demoed it, and we didn't record Sheer Heart Attack until a couple of albums later. Later on, and finally, he talked to Mojo in 2019, so a kind of recent quote in the past 5 years. I always like Sheer Heart Attack. I started the song when we were doing the Sheer Heart Attack album, but didn't get around to finishing it. By the time I did, punk had come along. This song came before punk. Foo Fighters do a good version. Sheer Heart Attack actually sounds like a Foo Fighters song. There you have it. Those are the quotes. Those are the quotes. Let's get into actually listening through these tracks. The studio version is first, and then we'll jump to the live versions. Of course, live, the band did play it right from the get-go, and they played it through 1982, the Hot Space European tour. They dropped it for the World Tour. We brought it back a little bit during the 1984 Works Tour. They kind of alternated with Jailhouse Rock during the encores. And it was dropped after that and never played again. I think that was the last time it was played, not counting the time they played, like maybe Foo Fighters. I think Roger joined a Foo Fighters time live. But as far as a Queen concert goes, never Queen and Paul Rodgers, not Queen and Adam Lambert. Roger never did it on his own during any of his solo tours, and certainly Brian didn't either. So really, it pretty much was dropped after 1984. But let's listen to that first version, that studio version where it all started out, and then we'll come back. We'll talk about the rest as well. Okay, click on that link below to find your YouTube link. I'll be here.
Well, you're just 17. All you wanna do is disappear.
All right, that is the studio version. It starts off with a bang. The little guitar noise leads into that very, very punk riff. If you listen to this closely, you hear what Brian is saying. It's almost impossible at times to distinguish between Freddie's voice and Roger's voice, which is so interesting to me because, quite frankly, they are very different sounding voices. Freddie has a very different voice than Roger's Rod Stewart-ish grasp and growl. But at the same time, I have found over the years that the band has worked so closely together and that they sing so tightly in their harmonies. I feel like sometimes they take on attributes of the other singer. There are Freddie lines in here which are definitely Freddie. You can kind of hear as the line ends that sound in the beginning like actually Roger's singing it. I don't know, is Freddie kind of eeping some of Roger's stuff, maybe because he's trying to sing like the demo. Maybe that's part of it. If so, he does a great job. You do hear Roger kind of sneak in on some things. Definitely the hey, hey, hey's are definitely both Freddie and Roger together. And some of the harmonies and the do knows are definitely Freddie and Roger together. You can hear the inarticulates, the inar, which is part of that cold open I did. It's one of my favorite parts of the song. It's so thrashy punk. I love it. But the chorus parts, the sheer heart attack, very attacking on the note, but very much Freddie and Roger. One interesting lyric that I said, the turn on the TV, let it drip right down in your eyes line. I feel it happens in Queen a lot. They kind of have these kind of callbacks or call sideways, I guess. Because if you remember, Roger Taylor in 1977 did have his first single, which was I Want to Testify, backed with Turn on the TV. So I kind of feel like this was maybe developed, maybe Turn on the TV was developed at the same time, or maybe he worked on Sheer Heart Attack again at that point. And there's some crossover in the lyrics. That's not the first or last time this will happen in Queen. Specifically in Roger's songs, especially as we get to the Miracle album, there's another song in there that kind of crosses over with the Cross song. But I just notated that as, maybe I could be completely wrong, maybe just Roger's lyrics writing similar things, who knows? But I did want to note that. I do like towards the end of the verse, there is a missing, I put that in quotation marks, do you know? Just kind of comes in with the lyrics. I think it's done purposefully. They leave it off as a way to maybe do something different than what they had done previously. I've mentioned that in a couple of different episodes before, where we never like to do the same thing over and over again. And this is the track where it's kind of close to doing the same thing over. There's no build in this track. It starts out high and energetic and fast, and it ends high, energetic, and fast. And the instruments are all the same. It's like they build adding more and more instruments. So maybe taking away something was the way to kind of go, okay, there's a pause there, there's a space there that we can kind of feel a little bit of a difference from this verse to the previous verse. Middle section is where I need to have a little quick rant. There is this high-pitched, like feedbacky, screeching guitar, which I have to say, I'm going to put a spoiler alert on the Crown Jewel section. I'm not putting the album version #1 right away. I'll tell you that right mainly because of that feedback. It ruins the song for me. I have a hard time listening to it on the headphones or even on the stereo or car stereo or wherever I'm listening to it. It's just so piercing and so irritating, and it takes me out. I have to kind of like almost take the headphone off while it's going on. Ruins a song for me. It's a small bit of the song. It's not like a very long part, but it's a little too long. Enough of it was too long, to be honest with you. But I really don't like that part of the song at all. I will counter and say the drum to get us back in has this like little drum riff that kind of pans through around where you get back into the energetic punk ending is great. I do love that portion of the song. But yeah, then have the sudden and abrupt ending. It's a very punk song through and through, not gonna lie. So, all right, that's the studio version. Let's listen now to the Queen Rocks video edit. And there's not a lot different here, but it is an important difference. I'll let you listen to it, come back, and we'll talk about it briefly before we move on. All right, there you have it from the Queen Rocks compilation in 1997. They made a VHS video of the album. It's had slightly different videos for all the songs. Compilation was meant to be a collection of all of their hard rock efforts, or most of their hard rock efforts, minus the one ballad, which was the new single at the time, No One But You, Only the Good Die Young. Now, the video version of Sheer Heart Attack is edited down slightly. The video is a kind of a rare video. It takes clips from like Rainbow 74, Hammersmith 75, Earl's Court 77, Houston 77, Hammersmith 79, Buenos Aires 81, Wembley 86, and other Queen videos like Under Pressure and Keep Yourself Alive. It takes all these and kind of puts it into a mix. Now, the audio from that, though, is slightly edited down about 15 seconds. And got to tell you, almost all of that 15 seconds is from that screeching guitar feedback. That's cut down significantly. So for me, it's a far superior version of the track. I like this one much better because it just takes out that little bit of screeching that I don't like and gives me the rest of the sound that is there in tenfold as it is. So I appreciate the edit there. Good work, good job. I don't know, maybe somebody had the same thought as I did, or else need to cut. If you're going to cut something off of this song, that's what you would cut, I would think. Maybe I'm not alone in that, obviously. I had nothing to do with the video, and someone else did it. So, all right, let's now move on to the next version. This is the original rough mix, released as part of the News of the World 2017, the 40th anniversary of its bonus version. They had a lot of demos and original mixes. This is going to listen. We're going to listen to that down below, like I said, in that YouTube link, which is in the Google Sheet. Click on that if you'd like. Come back, and I'll tell you all about that version.
Can I have some of the other lights off?
All right, there you go. An interesting curio. And again, one of those things that I was excited to get on the News of the World bonus, the box set version. I wish the band would do more of these. I don't know if they feel like these are not as interesting and not as something they want to provide. But quite frankly, even if you don't have full songs or even scratch demos in the vault, even alternate takes like this or earlier versions are always interesting to listen to. This one's mostly instrumental. It's didn't have a lot of vocals in it at all. It does have the harmonious sheer heart attack from the choir, from the chorus sections as well. You have to begin with a little bit of Roger chatter. There's an interesting guitar riff that begins without anything else playing, which is nice. Then it slides right into the rest of the version. I feel like this is mostly Roger. I feel like Brian might be on it a little bit. I don't know if Freddie's on it at all. It does feel like Brian's maybe slides a few more pieces of guitar in that as he's trying to figure out what he wants to do with his version, because obviously Roger's playing a lot of the rhythm sections where Brian gets to get his own stabs in here and there. I do love what happens after the first verse. That's where it seems like the guitar mostly gets a lot more of the experimental side of things. And of course, the ending is a little different, goes a little bit further on, not as abrupt of an ending as it is on the studio version. But overall, it's really kind of a cool version. Again, though, it's like the instrumental section. I'd like to hear. If I'm going to have a crown jewel, I want to have a more full vocal version. But I do having the long uncut ending that's not on the album version. Great to listen to, a great curio for sure. All right, one more studio piece. This is the reel-to-reel version, which, if you've heard me talk about a few of these before, the Wessex Sound Studios had a reel-to-reel tape of News of the World, and a lot of times some alternate versions are on them when they got released. They are slightly not released when they were found. They're just earlier mixes, earlier versions. Some are not too different. Some of them are a little bit different. This one was definitely a little bit different. So let's listen to that, and then we'll come back and we will talk about it.
Well, you're just 17, all you wanna do is disappear.
All right, there's the reel-to-reel version that has leaked. I've got to always point out that these are unreleased recordings. These are not out there officially released. Therefore, it's sometimes you have to keep that in mind. I don't know. Sometimes it's the source material that might have made this happen. For example, it's a very much slower feel on this track, and I don't know if that's a tempo. I don't know if it's a result of somebody digitizing it at a slower speed potentially. I don't know. I have no idea. I'm saying that all I can say is that it does sound slower than what we got. So perhaps it's the source. Perhaps it is the mix. Perhaps that's what they wanted to do for this version. Either way, it's definitively a slower feel. There's a much heavier echo put on the vocal, especially on Freddie's voice during the verses, which is interesting. I gotta say, the vocal also feels a little bit buried in comparison to the final mix. Again, I don't know if that's a source thing or if that's a mix thing. It's always hard to tell. But beyond that, there's not a whole lot different with it. It's a little longer. It's definitely a little longer. As noted, it's about, I think, 20 seconds longer than the original version, the album version, I should say. Some differences perhaps in the guitar mixing as well. But nothing earth shattering or anything like that. Interesting version. Again, I like all these versions. Give me all of the 10, 15, 20, 30 versions, as many versions as I can listen to. I'll always find a way to listen to it and see if I can get anything more out of it. But that is the ending of the studio versions. Those four. Let's get into the live versions now. Unlike what we do, I don't listen to every single version and come back. I'm just going to listen to them all at this point. All the rest of them: Houston 77, Live Killers, Live Hammersmith 79, Live Paris 79, Rock Montreal, and On Fire at the Bowl. Listen to all of them if you'd like, or pick and choose which ones you want to listen to, or listen to none of them and come back. Just don't even bother pausing it. Just let it go through, and I'll come right back and I'll talk about every single version in one little mix, and then we'll go from there.
Hey, you ready to rock and roll?
All right, then let's talk about the live versions here. I know previously I had kind of put little mini rankings and gone up and down. I'm not going to do that this time, as there's only a handful of them. I'll just talk about it because they're all actually very similar to a degree too. It's not like they have specific things I can point out and say, oh, this is so much different than this version. They're all pretty somewhat similar kind of versions. But let's go through it. The main overall thing about the live version is I feel like it's a speedier take even. Like the album version's really up-tempo, really energetic. And the live version, they take it even a step further. And I think it's part of that adrenaline going, even though it's usually played at the end of the concert. I feel like they really want to have that moment of pure chaotic energy, and almost all the time, specifically at one point during maybe mean, Paris, I think it's Paris, I think it is, that they almost feel like they're going to go out of control. They almost feel like they're going to lose it. They're on the edge of losing it. But professionals, they never do. They never do quite lose it. But it really feels like that's training. That's like jumping up and down the track. Like any moment they can go off the track, but they never quite get off the track. But I do like the live version a lot. There's always a lot of energy there. You start out with Roger on a gong during the early eras when he had a gong to use. Always open up with some kind of big spoke, are you ready to rock and roll? And he comes out with his drum, very high energy drum pattern. I also noticed that the bass is really heavy during these. John getting a chance to play it finally. It just sounds, depending on the mix, some of them, some of the ones are more not quite as mixed, like really mixed as some of the album versions. The bass can stand out a little bit too much at times. I feel like the Hammersmith 1979 and Houston 77 are definitely really heavier, bass heavy than the rest of them. Some of them are different. Freddie in Houston 77 feels more like Roger, a little missing from Roger's vocals are really missing from the track a little bit. Freddie is very much stronger, much more stronger. Roger's vocals get really strong in the Live Killers version, which, by the way, if you go to queenlive.ca, there's that great Live Killers analysis, because Live Killers, I've mentioned this a few times, was not all one concert with different tracks, and not only just different tracks, they would take a couple different different venues, like they take like Sheer Heart Attack, they would take like a part of it from Lion 79, part from Paris 79, and merge them all together. Not sure why they did that. It's actually a bad example that you're talking about in this particular song, because Sheer Heart Attack was all one, as far as we can tell. It's all one version, this one from Lion in 1979. But that's a great, if you ever want to see Queen Live site, when it's specifically the Freddie era, Bob Wagner runs that site. It's a really a treasure trove of information. Some of the mixes are, like I said, are better than others. I think Paris 79 is probably the best mix of what we got. Montreal is always an awesome mix, although the audience always push a little bit down further than I'd like, but you do get to hear more from Freddie and Roger in that one. Quite energetic. On Fire at the Bowl is a great version. I got a great version in there as well. Little jam session that really works at the end. You don't hear a lot of the synthesized drums. You can start hearing that a little bit there. Not during this song particularly, though. Yeah, it's really kind of cool versions. Freddie's probably got his most aggressive vocal in Hammersmith 79. I don't know, maybe it's the video there, and I get to see Freddie really pushing the boundaries with his energy there as well. Yeah, all are great versions. All are definitely great versions. So where they fall in our Crown Jewels list, we'll have to decide that. Alrighty, let's rank these at the Crown Jewels to figure out which one is the best version from least to best. The lowest version I have here is that reel-to-reel version. Again, I didn't like the slower tempo of it. And that might be a source thing. Perhaps if I got an actual crystal clear source, it might move it up a little bit more. But out of what we have here, that's my least favorite. It's a very energetic track, so you take the energy away even a little bit, and then it's like, well, what are we doing here? Why are we bothering? From there, this is where I place the album version, specifically because of that feedback. Not a fan of the feedback. Like the song itself, but I like a lot of everything else about it. The feedback pushes it down. From there, Live in Houston 1977. I do like this version overall. I think what I have against it is a little bit of the mix. The bass is really too heavy in the mix for me. They don't feel like they're gelling as a band. And again, this is a mix thing, maybe not the sound of the band itself, depending on how it felt in concert. I didn't get to hear a lot of Roger's vocals with Freddie in this specifically compared to some of the other live versions. It's a fine version. I just like the other ones a little bit more. Up from there, we got the original rough mix. There's enough going on. It's amazing, actually, they put this one above Houston, because this is not a complete song, right? It's just the instrumental version with a little bit of vocals here and there. However, the interesting stabs of guitar, the different beginning, the alternate ending, make it much more of an interesting piece for me. I war with myself all the time, sometimes, whether like the curiosity factor of it pushes it into a little higher in the listing than it perhaps should. Because in all frankness, I should probably put original rough mix probably down to probably below the album version, honestly, because it is an instrumental version only. Interesting to listen to, but as far as the best version, however, with that in mind, this is much more about the instrumentation than it is the vocals. So I'll let it slide and I'll move it up to where it is. It's still pretty far down the list compared to everything else. So That lets me get away with it a little bit more without me worrying about it too much. If there's a difference between this being like number 1 or 2, then I have a little more of a conversation, a little more thinking about it before I made this final decision. All right, from there, Live Killers, Lion 1979. Again, it's a fine version. I'm not a huge fan of the mix of the entire Live Killers albums, but I think there's other versions that are definitely mixed better that I like more. Rock Montreal is up from there. This is kind of interesting for me. Rock Montreal is one of my favorite Queen concerts of all time. It is a peak Freddie era Queen concert. Again, the mix is almost peak as well, except for the audience feeling a little bit like less energy because it's so down in the mix. But at this point, I feel like it's a couple of versions that are that encapsulate this song just a smidge better, just a smidge better. On Fire at the Bull is next, and actually it's a very similar sound, a very similar feel to Rock Montreal. In fact, I find these concerts go hand in hand very well. 81, 82, same time frame, really a little bit different tour, but still kind of similar overall. From there, we got the Rock's video edit. This is my favorite studio version by far because it just takes out a little bit of that feedback and makes everything else shine a little bit brighter because of it. But that means we have our crown jewel. It is one of the 2 live versions from 1979. I have either Hammersmith 1979 or Paris 1979. Now, Paris was probably mixed better. I do feel that Paris is mixed better. It's a great encapsulation of the song of what it's trying to do. It does feel like a true Freddie Roger duet. However, my favorite version is probably the Hammersmith version. And that's because it feels the most aggressive, the most raw, the heaviest bass that still feels like it's in the mix. And Freddie has a lot of playfulness in this one, especially with the ad-libs toward the end. He starts shooting some other vocals out there, which I always like. I would make that a high priority for me because I know it sounds similar, stupid because like, what does it do? It's an ad-lib, right? But it feels a little more different from the album version. It gets a little more playful. It captures that Queen energy very well. So, your miles may vary. If you tell me Paris is your favorite, totally get it. If you tell me the Rock's video edit, I totally get it. If you told me Montreal, I would get it. But as far as I go, my choice, Hammersmith 1979. However, because as we are putting up my list on Spotify, you'll find that in the description as well. My Spotify list I've been keeping so far, building this playlist out as we go. That is not available. Hammersmith 1979 is not available. So that will be on my YouTube music playlist because I have it and I've uploaded it myself. So in order to fix that for the Spotify playlist, I'm going to put the Paris 1979, which was my number 2, as the substitute crown jewel for that playlist. It's a public playlist. If you'd like, find that list and save it for yourself. We're going to build it every week until we have a complete crown jewels playlist. I'm doing the same for the solo projects as well. It should be a lot of fun there to go through those at the end for sure. Speaking of the rest of the podcast, I do have ideas that have been kind of kicking around in my head. I'm saying this now because it's the end. Before we move on any further, I do have some ideas that we're going to put together about maybe doing some alternate albums, some alternate, like I'm going to build alternate albums out. I like building these different kind of takes, taking these different takes and putting them together. Maybe some fantasy live versions. I don't know. Kicking around these ideas. Let me know what you would like from the podcast as far as Queen content would be on this journey here. It'd be separate from Crown Jewels. It'd be a separate podcast. I probably won't do this till much later on, until some things calm down from my other main channel as well. Right now I have so much going on, so many podcasts I do. It's hard to have time for everything. All right, well, let me rate this song then on a scale of 1 to 11 because I always turn things up to 11 here on PLD Projects. On a scale of 1 to 11, I'm going to rate Sheer Heart Attack as I'm going to give it a 7.5. No, I'll get up to an 8. I'll put up to an 8. I do like this quite a bit. If I had to be solely basing it on the album version, that feedback would probably kick it down to a 6, maybe even a 5, because that's much I hate that. I know it's a little over the top when you go down that low because of one section, but it really takes me out of the song. It really bugs me. It's a pet peeve of mine. But without that, overall, the song gives me an 8. I love the energetic feel to it. It's not like something Queen does very often. Stone Cold Crazy is something similar to that degree. So that's where we're going to go, a solid 8. All right, that will do it for this week. Next week on Crown Jewels, All Dead, All Dead. I believe it's the first time we see a Queen band member writing about a pet. It's certainly not the last time. Yes, it's a beautiful, beautiful ballad written about Brian May's pet cat. I get it. I'm a crazy cat guy. I'm a crazy dog guy too. I love animals. So I understand why you would feel like you have to write a song about them. All right, that's it, folks. If it's the first time here, hit that like, hit that subscribe. If you're on the audio feed, leave a review or click that 5 stars for us. Help us out, of course. If you want to support the channel or the main PLD Products channel, please do so as best you can. If you want to join the Patreon, patreon.com/PLD Projects. I have a bunch of different crew members out there. Austin Goodell, Brandon Buckingham, Jeff Alterman, Jeremiah Morris are all really great people, and I really do appreciate everything they've done. They helped me keep the lights on for sure. I could not do it all without you. I love you guys so much. Yeah, we did some great extra content on there. That's where I do the Harris-tons, where I go through the Ed Harris IMDb catalog one by one as well, kind of like Queen, except for with Ed Harris. On the main channel, I do a lot of different movie and TV podcasts. I do Two Mediocre White Dudes on Film with PJ Campbell, where you lean into horror. Right now, we're going through the Friday the 13th saga. I do review every other week with my partner Lego, who we talk about the franchise V from the 80s and 2009's reboot, going through all of those. I'm doing a Holy Snokes Star Wars podcast with my partner Maddie Gunner. We do Star Wars every week, news and other topics of whichever comes up. Also, a new one with PJ Campbell, Big Blue Box with PJ and PLD, our Doctor Who podcast, which will come out sporadically as an after show type of podcast, not a weekly thing or bi-weekly, but whenever specials come out when the series starts, we'll do some more there as well. Yeah, I think that will do it, folks. I appreciate you guys so much. Stay tuned until next time. Again, all dead. But until then, keep yourself alive and Godspeed to people.